How do we go from a cool photograph to an epic compositional design? In this video, I'm going to share with you my brand new design process. Roll that intro. Hi there and welcome to the studio. My name's Andrew and it's an absolute pleasure to have your company once again. Now in this video, I want to share with you my compositional design process. Often when I'm painting, I'll use photographic references, and I found this piece of reference that came from an amazingly talented photographer, Will Patino, who's based in the South Island of New Zealand. Now I reached out to Will and asked him if he would kindly allow me to use this image, and luckily he agreed. And I told him, hey, you're not going to recognize this by the time I'm done with it because I'm going to do quite a bit to this. But in this photograph, there are so many amazing things going on that I just blew my mind. And I thought, man, there's a painting here. I just know it. So what I wanted to do is show you the process of how I go about changing and manipulating the reference material using a series of first thumbnail sketches, then a more detailed pencil drawing, followed by a color study, and now a new step that I've added to it is drawing over the top of that color study using Photoshop. Now, I'm not saying that this is the right or the only way of creating a compositional design. It's just a method that works for me. So without further ado, let's jump right in and let me share with you the complete design process. All right, there's a lot to love about this image. Really, really interesting. I'm going to start off with just a little thumbnail. I think we're going to go landscape format, although it's a pretty cool composition. We could go vertical format, but just shoot from the hip. We'll start off landscape format, not quite square, but close, about that size. All I'm looking for first are the initial shapes. I'm looking at the image and I start off by going, okay, what do I love about this image? What's working? What's not working? And what if? Okay, so it makes a pretty nice composition, but maybe incorporate more light in the scene. So for this first initial thumbnail sketch, I'm going to do my best to get as close as possible to that idea. Also, knowing full well I'm going to have to draw this another 6 times, right? Place the horizon or the far edge of the lake right about there. That feels about right. Come up nice and high with that mountain. I love that snow just nestled in the valley. That's really cool. Got to make sure we incorporate that. And then, of course, in the foreground, we've got that amazing cracking ice. Of course, we've got to get that shadow cutting across there. It's rough. I want to be able to see from a glance, is this composition going to be something that's worth painting, or do I need to spend some more time? You know the answer to that already. Pretty happy with that so far. It's gonna work as a painting. We can push this so much further though, and that's the point of this exercise, is what can we get out of this idea and how good can we make it? How good does this get? Now let's begin to manipulate this further and start to ask those questions and just try and get as much out of this idea as possible. So let's run through those questions again. What's working? What's not working? What if? I think I'm gonna keep the landscape format. That's working. Let's go ahead and keep that horizon line about where it is. I think this time what I want to do is create maybe a bit of separation in this ice in the foreground. Wrap into the scene in a more interesting shape. That saddle will offset slightly too, and we'll bring that light cutting down into the scene. Get more light down in there. Let's darken that water again as before. Some really interesting shapes there. Quite geometric. Not bad. Very simple. As you can see, there's not a lot going on here at all. I can still tell so much about this composition and tell whether it's going to work or it's not. Much better use of the pictorial space here. I'm not bound to the light that I'm seeing in the scene. I'm almost thinking of creating a spotlight effect. A bit tough to communicate with this little thumbnail sketch, but put that idea away for later. Yeah, I'm much happier with this one. I think that's working. That's definitely working. The vertical format I think is going to stick. This is definitely going to be a vertical scene. I think I might move the horizon or the far edge of that leg up. I think we're going to push it up. Prioritize that cracking ice. Keep that relatively offset, just off to the left-hand side of the painting. I'm very happy with the vertical format. I think that's the key here with this scene. But there's something niggling at me. I want to use atmosphere as well as light within this painting, and I haven't really given myself any space in which to do that. So here in this fifth thumbnail, I think that's what I'm going to go ahead and add, is a bit of sky. All right, I think I've got something here that's gonna work. I'm really excited about it. I think it captures the scene, but it just pushes it a bit further. There's some really exciting stuff going on in this. So let's take this little thumbnail sketch and turn it into a much bigger drawing. We can get some really cool random shapes in here for that broken rock slope. Bit of a shadow cast. The line of the shadow will lead the eye into that rock that's sitting right there. I want to watch out for that center line. See, if I drop it in the center, I think I'll weaken the composition. So slightly offset, have that line cross the center line, anchor it there. I'm going to use all of these lines here in the foreground, this perspective, again, to just point the viewer in the right direction. I'm very happy with this composition. I think it's going to work. Let's darken the top left-hand corner, and that will channel the attention into the painting. The one thing, though, that I think is missing from this is atmosphere. I might indicate a bit of mist rising off the water when it comes time to paint this, but that will really come into effect when it comes time to do the digital drawing. But all in all, pretty happy with this. Let's put some color down. Now, the point of this exercise is to create a loose arrangement of brush strokes so I can see the relationship of one color to another and the overall feel of the scene without worrying about detail. Details for the next part of the process, but right now I just want to see the overall scene in color, and this simple palette will get me there. But here on my palette, I've got burnt umber, transparent yellow oxide, a combination of Cremnitz white and titanium white at 50-50, cadmium lemon, quinacridone magenta, ultramarine blue, and cobalt teal. And I've initially lined up the composition, just following along with my drawing, creating an outline of the basic shapes. Now I'm going to block in this scene starting with whatever's furthest away and work those tiers of depth towards the viewer. So naturally, the place I'm going to start is the sky. I've finished my color study and I'm pretty happy with where this composition's going. Now in the past, I would have just jumped straight into painting at this point. But in recent years, especially for some bigger works, I've added another step, and that's the digital design. So now I'm sitting here at my desk and I'm gonna start drawing over that color study into Photoshop. First thing, I'm gonna add some layers. Now, the biggest advantage, I've gotta say, for drawing digitally is this ability to work in layers. And it's just so, so helpful. I'm just going to go through that process again with those 3 questions of what's working, what's not working, and what if. So every step of this process is like running it through a filter where we continually make improvements. So what's working? I'm loving the light coming in from this direction. I'm getting a good sense of that. I really enjoy the way the light cuts across those rocky slopes here, and we've got a bit of an angle that indicates the direction of the light. I quite like this rocky protrusion here and a bit of that rocky slope. I like the ice in the foreground. I mean, this is kind of interesting, the way it leads the eye into the composition. That's working for me too. And I like the mirror-like quality of these reflections. So I've got a more calm water scenario here in my color study. Now, some things that aren't quite working for me. Whilst I like this rocky protrusion, I feel that this shape here is weakened by being echoed and mirrored in that shape in the distant slope. And this line is picked up and continued into the distance. Now, what makes a stronger composition is interlocking shapes. The other thing that's not quite working for me is the way this ice breaks and forms a very even and symmetrical shape. Again, that bowl effect right here in the foreground. It's not a big deal, but that's kind of bothering me. This angle and shape being repeated, it's just a little bit too much of a chattered effect. It doesn't have that natural look that the cracking ice shelf here and my reference material has. So here, I think what I'm going to do is break that somehow. I haven't quite decided yet. We've already talked about changing the shape of this rock. That's essential, I think. I think it would really help so much to add that layer of mist and atmosphere through this bottom section of the painting and almost have that mist rising off the top of the surface of the water. Now here with this bowl effect, I think what we could do is probably afford to remove that. And we probably don't even need this here. I don't think either one of those serve any purpose. So what we could do is then pick up a new line. So it'd be okay to have a little bit of ice jutting out. We could change its angle slightly so it doesn't appear to be deliberate. And then last, the thing I think I'd like to emphasize is this really interesting opportunity for reflection right here and strengthening that. I think that'll work. Oh, atmosphere, of course. I mean, that's the thing I really want to push in this painting. I don't really want to go over the top with the cloud. I just want an indication of light and shade here, but a very diffused cloud. So I might like to channel just a little bit of that effect, maybe diffuse this line a little bit more, bring in more softness as we go from the highlight here into the shadow portion, and that might create this spotlight effect here with these mountains, and then I'll have more intensity in the light right there. And then, of course, the gradient down here in the foreground, we can make that a bit of a smoother transition going into the painting as well. So keeping the light within the same. Does that make sense? I've just scribbled all over this thing, but I think it's going to be cool. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is a pretty involved design process, and maybe I have the tendency to push things a little bit too far. But where do we start this whole thing? Well, I started off with that amazing reference material, and then I wanted to see what I could do to make some improvements to make it a really cool painting. So first, I ran through some thumbnail sketches, and then asked myself those 3 questions between each sketch. What's working, what's not working, and what if? And I made changes with each of the thumbnails. This was followed by a more detailed pencil drawing, then followed up by a color study. And then finally, I drew over the top of my color study with a digital drawing using Photoshop. Now again, I just want to say a huge thank you to Will Patino for allowing me to use his photograph for this week's video. If you want to see more of Will's work, check him out on Instagram and find him on his website. Those links are provided down below. Now this is just a short video that I'm sharing with you here on YouTube, but there's a much longer extended version available if you're following me on Patreon. This video in particular is about an hour and a half long, where I go into more detail with the color study and show you my palette shots, but also an extended digital design process as well. Now for just $5 a month, you could get exclusive access to videos that I upload for you on Patreon. I'm sharing critique videos that are several hours long, but also some time lapses and some cool bonuses and extras. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, make sure you click the link in the description down below and go and follow me on Patreon. Well, that about does it. I'm going to get back to painting. It's been an absolute pleasure spending time with you here in the studio, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. So long.